Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. Tehami. In today's program, we are going to once again take a stock of the bilateral relationship between the United States of America and India that has hit the lowest ebb in decades because of the imposition of 50% total tariffs by US President Donald Trump on Indian goods export to the United States of America. These two leaders have been speaking very high of each other, and over the last few months we have seen this particular bilateral relationship nosediving, in fact, with the kind of perception the US administration is having regarding the Indian authorities' approach in terms of when it comes to the bilateral trade between the two countries, and also India's purchase of Russia's weapons and energy at the same time. Also, some of the key officials of the President Trump administration saying that this purchase by India of the Russian oil is actually fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. Also, when we talk about the recent standoff between Pakistan and India, it was more than 30 times President Donald Trump took the credit of brokering the ceasefire between the two, but there has been a continuous pattern of denial on the part of the Indian authorities. Also, when we talk about Indian high-handedness and its state sponsorship of terrorism across the world, particularly when the Western countries, including the US and Canada, were also targeted. President Donald Trump signed an executive order and imposed 25% additional tariffs into that 25%, which already announced regarding Indian export of goods to the United States of America. In that particular executive order, he had said, let me quote, "I find that the government of India is currently directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil. Accordingly, and as consistent with the applicable law, articles of India imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be subject to an additional ad valorem rate of duty of 25%, unquote." Later on, in an event, he said, let me quote, "The tariff on India was just the start. You are going to see a lot more, so much secondary sanctions," unquote. We've also seen a statement coming from the White House which says Russian Federation's actions in Ukraine pose an ongoing threat to U.S. national security and foreign policy, necessitating stronger measures to address the national emergency. Indian imports of Russian oil undermine U.S. efforts to counter Russia's activities in Ukraine. The U.S. will determine which other countries import oil from Russia and will recommend further actions to the president as needed, unquote. We have also seen a response that has come from Indian side, which has termed this particular action by the US administration as being unfair, unjustifiable, and unreasonable. It is also said that the US has actively encouraged it to buy Russian oil so that the global crude prices would stay under control, where the West could reduce its dependence on Russian energy, also hinting that it will take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interests and economic security, unquote. There was also a statement by the Russian Kremlin regarding as to India's right of choosing its own trade partners. We know for a fact that President Donald Trump also announced the signing of the trade deal with Pakistan. In this particular situation, are there any opportunities on which the Pakistani authorities could capitalize? And also, we're talking about that particular post by President Trump on Truth Social of helping Pakistan to develop massive oil reserves, and perhaps one day Pakistan would be selling that oil to India. And that reference in that particular post towards India, what does that also depict? All of these important aspects related to this particular development. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Dr. Manzoor Ahmed. He is associated with Prime Minister's Committee on the US Tariffs. Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to be joined by Mr. Ahmed Hassan Awan. He is foreign affairs expert. Mr. Awan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Later on in the show, we'll be joined by another participant. As he joins in, I'll be introducing him as well. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, quickly trying to understand, what do you think is the trigger at this particular point in time for President Donald Trump of imposing back-to-back 25% tariffs earlier? Not much of this time span had lapsed that he imposed another 25% that now happens to be in total 50%. Firstly, as per your understanding, is this particular imposition of 50% tariff, does it solely owe to what President Trump in his recent posts has alluded to? It's because of the Indian purchase of Russian weapons and energy in particular.
Yes, yes, that is one big factor. But the other big factor is, you see, these tariffs were announced by President Trump in April, you know, on 2nd April, when what he called the Liberation Day, when he announced tariffs on various countries.
Right.
At that time, you know, Pakistan, he said, will be 29%, India is 25%, and other, you know, he announced 60 other countries.
Right.
Now, at the time, he said, you have up till 1st of August, I mean, first originally gave 3 months, but then 1st of August, to negotiate with the US.
Right.
So that how much market access you can give, so that I can negotiate the tariffs. Now, Pakistan took it seriously. They put up 2 committees, one with the businessmen, another with the government officials, to negotiate. And you see, his Trump's big point was, okay, with each of these countries, you have so much of surplus with US. So what can you do? What can you buy from the US? How can you increase your market access so that this surplus is you know, kind of reduced? If, for example, in case of Pakistan, we were exporting to the US $5 billion, and US exports to Pakistan was $2 billion. So he said, this $3 billion, how can you reduce this? And we took it seriously. We went, we talked to them, etc., and said, you know, there's okay, you send to Pakistan cotton, maybe we can buy more cotton. You send soybean, and we can maybe buy more soybean, and things like that. So we showed us, and the fact that we recently done this tariff reforms and lowered our tariffs, so we were in a better position to do this. On the other hand, India did not avail that opportunity because they have been trying to negotiate a much bigger deal with US. So they were thinking that they should not be a part of this deal, and they must get much lower tariff or maybe zero tariff, you know, because they're a free trade agreement. So they, and that was another reason that they could not negotiate a deal. I think one of the other problems was that US wanted access on these agriculture products, and India was refusing to give agriculture products.
Right.
India was also reluctant to give too much deep discount on these US automotives, etc. There were those things, but they lost that. They did not expect that this is going to happen. They said, okay, you know, from whatever 25%, so that's okay. You know, other countries 20% will manage, but they didn't realize this other 25 is coming.
Okay, Mr. Awan, what's your understanding when we talk about the irritants? If we look at the face of this particular equation that is developed between these 2 countries, the US considering and holding India as a strategic partner, also India building that very perception in the which has of course now been shattered of net security provider as far as Indo-Pacific strategy of the US is concerned. What do you think has been the major trigger at this particular point in time? Because as far as that very relationship on a personal level these 2 leaders enjoyed, particularly when you talk about the first term of President Donald Trump, both these leaders actually even attended the political rallies, going into those political rallies and supporting the partner publicly at that particular point in time. Do we understand if all the triggers collectively analyzed at this particular point in time, they were non-existent at that particular point in time? Or were they existing at that particular point in time? And if yes, so what's the difference now?
Thank you for the question. I think before I answer the question, I'll sort of give a, try to give the context and background to the, the entire question. We need to understand that US since World War II has been a vocal proponent of free trade around the world. Throughout the Cold War, we saw this bloc politics of capitalist and communism, and ultimately with the end of the Cold War, we saw the dominance of US-led economic, ideas and liberal ideas, dominating the global economy. That allowed US to have that dollar hegemony as well. So initially, and even throughout the, history of trade talks, either in the GATT or WTO, one of the potent, hindrances that the USA has faced over the years has been from India actually and China secondary, right? So these two countries have, sort of played the global South brotherhood card and, tried to extract maximum, benefit for their own economies during that time as well. But at that time, USA was in a way, willing to overlook those aspects because of the Cold War factor, because they had a much bigger ball game at play. And then we saw that post Cold War, they wanted countries who were previously very nationalistic, protectionist to transition towards, opening their markets as well. So they were, in a way, giving them space to actually open up the markets as well. So in this context, what you've mentioned about India's trigger aspect, what has led to it, was something which was on the cards. You mentioned about the first term. You mentioned about how both the leaders, President Trump and PM Modi, got along very well.
Mr. Awan, I see your partner for the interjection over here. We just seen the recent past, right after President Donald Trump took over the office, right, for his second term. Indian Prime Minister Modi happened to be one of those few leaders who visited Washington.
Yes.
And at that particular time, he was trying to generate his so-called idea of making India great again in relation to the Make America Great Again.
So see, I'm coming to that point.
So from that particular summit between the two leaders in Washington, just most recently in February, down the lane, just a few months now, what has gone so wrong?
So see, Trump has always, even as his first campaign, yes, you're right about the fact that even recently as well, but Trump has labeled India as a tariff king as well, even in his first campaign as well. So it was something which was on the cards. Trump, being a business-minded, an unorthodox president in the global system, views things differently. And this time around, because USA has repeatedly used sanctions as a tool of war, it now feels that those sanctions are becoming increasingly ineffective. And why is that? Because countries like India are giving that leverage to countries like Russia, who had been sanctioned by the US, to access oil, and which is allowing, like he said, the Russian war machine to continue that war in Ukraine. That is one factor. Secondly, you have to understand domestic pressures as well. Trump increasingly faces a lot of domestic pressures as well, especially in terms of reviving the US economy. This was one of his biggest mantras of the campaign as well. So in terms of addressing those grievances, this was something which was expected, but at the same time, like you said, India used to market itself as a net security provider for the Indo-Pacific. That for Trump is something secondary for him. His prioritization depends on, re-engaging with the US public, ensuring their confidence, ensuring employment in the USA. And like the term says, onshoring is now becoming the norm. So it is becoming increasing in global economy that onshoring protection policies have once again become the norm. And again, like the trade deficit between India and the US is far, far greater, right? And you're right about the fact that there were expectations of the US president to give some kind of, exemptions on dairy products, agriculture, but for Indian Prime Minister, those were no-go areas. That is why it was a deadlock from both sides in that way.
Let me bring in another participant, Mr. Shahid M.G. Kiani is former ambassador, joining us on the link. Mr. Kiani, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Kiani, what's your understanding? What has gone so wrong that has annoyed President Trump so bad about somebody he used to call his friend, and he had been rallying for his support publicly? We've also seen the reciprocation of that happening from Modi as well. We've also seen the recent past, right after President Trump took over the office, it was Prime Minister Modi among those few leaders who visited Washington. He was trying to generate his idea of making India great again in relation to that Make America Great Again vision of President Donald Trump. From that particular summit until now, what has gone so wrong that President Trump has doubled down with 50% tariffs on Indian exports to the US?
Oh, let me state to you, the Indian policymakers have been looking at the impact of tariffs in the United States. Naturally, the what the tariffs going to hit the common man in the United States is a different subject or debate altogether. That has to be seen in the next few months. Now, what India has not been, the Indian leadership especially, has not been able to understand, first of all, the mindset of President Trump, and then his policies. They are two different things. They have, they continue to work that yes, the United States is a very close ally of India. They will be able to work with us. If the Quad uh, summit is due now, possibly in September, the quadrilateral dialogue, and then they are using us to contain United States, contain China, but it's not working. If you look at just about a month and a month back, you look at the United States, the people like it or not, President Trump has his own mindset and his own priorities. His priorities is United States first and Trump first also. The fact that Prime Minister Modi and the whole government has been stating that and denying that the President Trump and his administration played any role in the ceasefire between Pakistan and India in the post Pahalgam, that annoyed President Trump very, he was really uh, very annoyed as to, and he continued to say that I played a role, and then he appreciated Pakistan's government's maturity in accepting that this happened. The second thing was India's inflexibility in the tariff negotiations. If you recall, in 2019, President Trump's first term, he ended the free trade agreement with India. Now, coming back to this, the Indians should have realized that negotiating tariff issue is very important. It has to be give and take. We did it. Naturally, there is no comparison. India's economy is far larger. They have far more products to export to the United States, like their basically pharmaceuticals and the electronics. But the fact remains that in the inflexibility, they have been dragging it on and on without knowing that there is a limit to what President Trump wants. And second thing is, President Trump eyes the Nobel Peace Prize. And for that, he has been stating that not only did he end the war India-Pakistan, he played a crucial role in this Cambodia-Thailand thing. And now he's looking at the ending the war in Ukraine. Now, only today, President Putin has confirmed that he and President Putin and President Trump will be meeting in the United Arab Emirates. If he does that, this all three, and he's successful. But what is happening is they are blaming India, maybe rightly so, that they are buying oil and encouraging Russia to continue on its war path with with Ukraine. So these are things which does not go well. And this is in foreign policy. People are realist, and this is realism. President Trump's word is accepted globally. You may agree with it or not, but but this is what he is. He wants his word to be accepted. Many countries accept it. Some of them don't. But I was surprised
Your point,
at
Mr.
the
Kiani, I seek
that
your pardon for
India
the
and its
interjection over here. At this particular point in time, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. I understand well the kind of comprehensive view that you've just given as to what exactly happened when it comes to this particular trajectory that we are seeing that is clearly on a very slippery slope between the two countries. Now, what are the options at this particular point in time? But firstly, considering if we take into account this particular problem, which President Donald Trump has mentioned a number of times when it comes to Indian purchase of Russian weapons and energy, right? One of his key staff members has also talked of this purchase actually fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. Regarding Russia, regarding bilateral relationship of India with Russia, its purchase of Russian oil, what are the options? Can Indian authorities concede into this particular pressure by President Donald Trump and stop purchasing Russian oil?
If you look at the press release issued by the Ministry of External Affairs of India, I just read it. They are not agreeing, they do not accept that they will sustain the pressures to not to purchase oil from Russia. Please try to understand that the relationship between Russia, the previously Soviet Union and Russia, and then with India goes back decades. It has been decades that they go back. What they are looking at is that if they just accept President Trump's pressures, then the only friend they left in the region is Russia, and that is also will be undermined. I'm giving you my own opinion, and if and they are saying that they cannot negotiate with United States on the agricultural products between Haryana and Punjab. They're the bread baskets of India. They cannot accept these two. It's very difficult. And with the Quad summit taking place in September, I don't know whether President Trump would attend that or not. I think wisdom demands that that Prime Minister Modi negotiates with United States as quickly as possible. Otherwise, this 50% tariffs was going to undermine the Indian economy in a very bad manner. This is something, and
So it's going
the
to.
Indians do not like the Indians do not like that, that Pakistan is being considered as equal to India. So this is something. These are both things, economics and geopolitical geopolitics. But this is the real world. You cannot help it.
India doesn't want itself to be equated with Pakistan. That is what makes the Indian authorities feel annoyed when it comes to President Donald Trump not only taking credit for that particular ceasefire between the two countries. We've also seen that very historic meeting between Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Syed Munir. And after that, the kind of comments President Donald Trump came up with, that he said that he was honored to have met him. And then when the trade deal with Pakistan was struck, President Donald Trump referred to India as well. On one side, he was hinting at developing Pakistan's massive oil reserves. And also, at the end of that particular paragraph, in that particular post, he was referring to India. Perhaps in one day, you never know, Pakistan is going to sell that oil to India as well. That would definitely have not been taken well as far as Indian perspective is concerned. I'll come to you for understanding regarding as to this particular equation as it does play. What was actually the indication in that particular post when President Donald Trump refers to India in that trade deal signing announcement with Pakistan? Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, now the impact on India's economy. And of course, Mr. Shahid, MG Kiani is of the view that it's going to not fare very well with India's economy. How do you think it's going to have an impact? What could be the manifestation of that? And also, when we talk about this tariff increase, could it in turn bring any sort of a burden as far as the consumer of those Indian goods within the United States of America are concerned?
See, two things. One, US was the biggest export market for India. They were exporting something like 90 billion, so something like 20% of their total exports were good. So with 50% new tariffs, I think they will not be any longer competitive. I mean, you see, recently 2 years ago, when US gave India 20% edge in mobile phones, all assembling moved to India. So this 50% is huge. So it will move to the other thing was that US was the biggest investor in India. So, investing something like 45 last year, 24, they invested something like $45 billion. And this India's big success of their economy, growth more than 6%, etc. And then they were thinking that they would be able to have export volumes of something like $1 trillion. That's going to suffer quite a bit. And also, when, for example, now when Trump announced this 50% tariffs on India, so what happens is that those buyers from US, they will not be, they'll be cancelling their orders because 50% is too high. On the other hand, Indian manufacturers who were to export this, they would not be producing those goods because, what do? You can't keep them in warehouses, you can't keep doing. So this will be a major disruption for India.
Are there any options at this particular point in time with the kind of the deadline we've seen? It's going to be 21 days from the announcement of this particular additional 25% of the tariffs is going to last until 27th of August. So this particular time span in between, from the day we are talking now until 27th of August, are there any visible options at the hands of the Indian authorities that they might, or what would the Americans like at this particular point in time for Indian authorities to quickly concede?
I think they would already be trying behind the scenes.
But there have already been 5 rounds of negotiations. And
yeah, but still, I mean, recently their vice president was in India, his wife is Indian, so they must be using various sources behind the scene as to, you know, to appease US. And that's what most of the countries, 60 countries that negotiated these deals, that's what they did. I mean, so India must be trying, but it might be a difficult thing because India has publicly said that, you know, their own interests are top, and they're not going to negotiate on agricultural imports. They said because this is the bread and butter of our farmers, and then they also said that they are not going to quit.
I get your point. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, I see your partner for the interjection over here. I'll have to go for a quick short break. After the break, we'll resume the discussion from here. For that, stay tuned. Welcome back to Views on News. In today's program, we are discussing the continuously deteriorating bilateral relation between the United States of America and India after President Donald Trump has imposed 50% tariffs on Indian exports to the US. In the studio, we are joined by Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, Mr. Ahmed Hassan Awan, and on the video link, Mr. Shahid MG Kiani. Before heading for the break, we were in discussion with Dr. Manzoor Ahmed as to what could be the options at the hands of the authorities till 27th of August as to what they could concede quickly. Moving on with the discussion, bringing in Mr. Ahmed Hassan Awan. Mr. Awan, there are a number of very important points that have been highlighted by Mr. Shahid MG Kiani regarding President Trump doesn't only want the US first, but he also wants Trump first, right? He is also eyeing for a Nobel Peace Prize as well. So this particular credit that he has taken over for at least for 30 times, that he was the one who brokered the ceasefire between Pakistan and India. Pakistan welcomed that move. Also, there has been a pattern of denial on the part of the Indian authorities. How bigger a role do you think this particular factor has played in annoying President Trump?
I think it has played a significant role. I say so because, first of all, we have to understand that in this increasingly eroding rules-based order, states tend to look for their own interest. And I think in this 21st century, economic interest in many ways triumphed security interest, right? Secondly, I think if you look at India's role in the region since the beginning of the 21st century, US and India's partnership was actually labeled as the partnership of the 21st century. This is not what I'm saying, but this is something that US think tanks and Indian think tanks have been labeling their relationship, partnership with each other for the 21st century, the two bigger, you know, the biggest economy and the oldest democracy and stuff like that. So I think that element of, you know, strategic partnership that they had, which also enabled India to also secure a US nuclear civil deal as well, you know, giving them various exemptions vis-a-vis the Iranian gas pipeline as well, and various other, you know, waivers and exemptions that India sought because of their, like you mentioned, net security provider role. Trump doesn't view it that way. Trump sees that if China is a problem, I can deal with China through tariffs. He did that in the first term as well. So he does not need Quad. He does not view Quad, talking of Quad, he does not even view, he actually views NATO as a burden on US economy. So see, if he can view NATO as a burden, Quad is nothing. And he can also, he's been dealing with China in a trade war in the first term as well, and he's going to do the same thing in the second term as well. He's going to try to get the best deal out of the Chinese as well. So he does not need, he's not in favor of a military conflict with China. That is unaffordable for any country in the world right now. So therefore, the utility for US in terms of India's role in the Indo-Pacific has diminished multiple times, gone down the ladder. And this event, the May episode that we talked about, has sort of stamped that India cannot be or play that role of a net security provider. Rather, the more mature role that was played by Pakistan emerged more credible and got more applause. And we saw that even in the recent times as well, we've seen that 30, like you mentioned, 30 times the mention that Trump mentioned that, and he was in a way, in my view, trying to use that as a leverage over India as well, because he said that I want to have trade with you guys. Let's have a ceasefire and let's have trade.
Accepted that and appreciated that role. Do you think the picture could have been a little different for India at this point in time?
Sorry?
Had India appreciated that move
yes,
by President Donald Trump?
So in terms of appreciation, yes, that was obviously, could have played, it would have signaled that India is now, in a way bending the knee, if they could have, would have accepted
but Mr.
that
Awan,
role.
during these 5 rounds of negotiations we have seen through the Indian official statements, they were pretty positive that at the end of the day they are going to strike a deal. But again, going back to that very particular point, when this ceasefire was brokered by President Donald Trump, he referred to the trade also with both the countries.
Exactly.
That if you're going to stop, if you're not going to throw bombs at each other, so we are going to have trade, right? So if you want trade, you'll have to stop it, right? India didn't agree to that also. It continued not only continued to deny that very brokering of the ceasefire, but also said that no reference of such type of thing was ever made to India as far as striking a deal and stopping this particular sort of an action is concerned. That, do you think that also kind of rubbed the salt through the wounds of Indian side?
Definitely. I think that sort of rubbed the salt. And also, let me be very clear about it, that Trump, he might seem very, when he talks, we often talk about without filter, but he is also very shrewd in the manner that he actually used that episode to his favor, trying to, pressurize India. And let us not forget, the Indians continue to refuse and continue to deny this, but the reality is that it was the Indian side who actually initiated the ceasefire request from the US, pressuring Pakistan in a way, once Pakistan responded back. So I strongly feel that the trading card was used by the President Trump to use and leverage over India, because he did not want it to, ruin his friendship with Prime Minister Modi as well. But he got this opportunity to use it against India.
Right. Mr. Shahid Kiani, are there any ways at this particular point in time, or at least before 27th of August, for any sort of a damage control for the parties?
States to you that this is not India, which is, as they say, pre-Pahalgam and post-Pahalgam. In both these things, one, you have to see this thing. United States, I'm just coming back to tariff again. United States was looking towards India in containing China. It has failed. Now with the image of India in the battle of narratives of Indian narrative and our narrative, and the fact and the conflict, both in India in particular, in India in general, and Prime Minister Modi in particular's image has been damaged. Now, when you look at this, how can President Trump, who always admires strong leaders and strong countries, would be able to look at India as containing China? No way. He is, as said, one colleague was said, very right, said, he wants to deal with these countries directly. He doesn't have to need these bridges. He wants to deal with directly. Now, as 25, 26, they say, July approaches, my opinion is, I could be wrong, that behind the scenes, Indians must be working behind the scenes to find a way. Now, the first part, what I'm looking at is, why doesn't Prime Minister Modi pick up the phone and directly talk to President Trump? What is the harm? Two leaders do talk, and he can talk. And maybe President Trump is looking that the Prime Minister Modi would find some way to get rid of his ego and talk to me. I'm telling you, and behind the scenes,
Mr. Shahid, Mr. Kiani, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. That is exactly the point that I was also thinking. But do you think at this particular point in time, the stage or the scale at which this particular deterioration has now reached, do you really think that it would be President Trump expecting Modi to pick up the phone and call him? Or don't you think it would be rather Prime Minister Modi dying to pick up the phone and call President Trump directly? Rather, it would be President Trump who would be reluctant at this particular point in time to talk to him directly.
My opinion is, people are expecting that United States would just put an end to its relationship or downgrade relationship with India. I doubt it very much. These things never happen. My opinion is that President Trump, you know, Prime Minister Modi will have to eat his ego in the national interest of his own people, because his image has already been damaged in his own party. People looking at in the next election, they may not have this man as the candidate for the prime minister. The Prime Minister Modi, if he wants to leave a legacy, the legacy would be to pick up the phone, talk to him, or send some senior ministers right at this time, even publicly, to talk to the Trump administration and saying that, look, if this 50% tariffs are imposed on us, we will be nowhere. So in the larger interest of relationship between these two countries, it is better that we find a way out. Maybe 30%, 35%, not 50%. And this can happen in this real world. So I tell you, in global politics, nothing is permanent, I tell you. And the, and
I
I
get
just
your
want to,
point. Please finish your thought. Please go ahead. Mr. Kiani, please complete your thought. Mr. Shahid MG Kiani, former ambassador, joining us on the video link. Thank you very much for being with us on the shoot. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, if presumably India decides that it would stop purchasing Russian oil, is it viable for it because it is already getting that Russian oil on discounts, as well as a considerable oil import comes from Russia, 35 to 36%?
Well, it is possible because, there's, I think they can, it will be difficult because 1/3 of Indian oil comes from there.
And on a discounted
overnight,
price
but
as
they could also negotiate some time, like the European Union, when they stopped buying gas from Russia, they negotiated some time. So India could perhaps do this. You see, so long Trump, the way he is, if he can claim victory, okay, India is bowed down and is willing, so he will claim victory, and then perhaps he can show some flexibility.
From this 50%, where do you anticipate it could come down?
I mean, like other regional countries.
If we look at President Trump being serious in reducing the trade deficit with India.
No, but something like 25% would have perhaps already agreed. Had India taken it seriously, they were already at 25%. We came from 29 to 19%. So India would have been like similar to other countries.
Right. Mr. Awan, unfortunately short of time, but this is a very pressing question. I mean, do we anticipate a regime change in India when we clearly see these moves pressuring India, and there happens to be a consensus that has developed in the Western world when its high-handedness has been established with the record, the proven state sponsorship of terrorism in the Western countries in particular as well?
I think this is a huge factor behind the snub that the international community has given to India. And I mean, Modi is in a very catch-22 situation. If he picks up the phone and calls Modi, President Trump, he will be seen as a weak leadership, because his strongman image will crumble. And if he doesn't do that, his economy will suffer. So in both ways, his political future seems very dim. Lastly, I just want to make a comment and food for thought that if actually the US-Pakistan trade deal goes ahead, and US-Israeli companies do come in and help us the minerals and the oil reserves, I personally feel that this is also an element, the factor he said Pakistan could sell oil to India. US also knows India's involvement of terrorism in the region. They will not tolerate any kind of terrorism activities from the Indian side if US economic interests are in the region.
Mr. Ahmed Hassan, Awan, Foreign Affairs expert, thank you very much for being with us on the show. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, member Prime Minister's Committee on United States Tariffs, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.